Okay, so here we are again, and I want to go through at least a few of the textures I created for this environment, and that falls under the tilables, the hero props, so the stuff I textured one-to-one, and even the trim sheet that I made. So it might be a bit longer than the previous ones, but it will definitely give you a lot of insight into the process. So here's the environment, the finished environment. And the first thing I would like to go through is the textures for the wall. So you can see here I have the plaster, right? And I have these blue stones. And then I have some bricks peeking out very subtly. So this is actually a blended texture. And that's a technique used in Unreal and probably other game engines as well. But basically I can use the vertex colors. So let's go here. I can use the vertex colors to paint in some details, and it's pulling from 3 different textures, right? So that's really cool. So let's look at the textures and how I created those. Honestly, it's pretty straightforward because I am not necessarily a texturing master yet, but I have what I would consider a really straightforward process, but it works. So remember, we're creating stylized textures, so not anything extremely realistic. It's supposed to give you the impression of the thing and then maybe a little more. So if I just pay attention to this bottom square here, I'll just step through this quickly. This, I've organized it. So I have the large bump shapes, which if I double click this and I zoom out here, you can kind of see these shapes happening, right? And if I go here, I've multiplied it by what I call the cuts pattern. So basically you take some patterns, and in this case I used the crystal and grunge map that comes with designer, and I rotated this and crunched the levels on this one, combined them as you can see by using min, or otherwise darken in Photoshop and stuff. And then I used this to warp the vertical crystal. This isn't something you just magically figure out. This was a trial and error. So I knew Plaster had, you know, like the tool that they use to scrape the plaster onto the wall, and it may create shapes something like this, right? Probably not exactly, but that's the idea. And because it's stylized and I wanted to give it a bit of texture, I also included the cuts. And you can create cuts so many different ways, so let's not go into that right now. But so yeah, so I use clouds, and this went into a histogram scan of itself, and I used that to blur this warp. So this is not meant to be a designer tutorial. As you can see, it's not going very well, but I just wanted to show you that even though these are a lot of nodes, it has been broken down in a sensible manner. So these are the cuts and the large shapes, and then there's the grain texture. As you can see, there's some green on it, right? It's not that plaster that's really smooth, it's the grainy one. So that's a separate set of detail, high frequency detail, and even slightly more high frequency detail than maybe I needed. So down here is the low frequency detail, which I took some noise, 2 different noises, and I scanned them so that I only get these little cuts. And I put it through a good set of nodes, inverted it so that black is the thing that is cutting in and white remains the same. And then that goes into the various outputs. So that helps drive the ambient occlusion. As you can see, where there are crevices, it's darker. That's how that works. That's an oversimplification, but That's kind of how it works. And I combined the normal between this and this, and I realized that if I just added this detail to the existing normal, it did not give me the result. So let's do that really quickly so I can show you what I mean. Let's say I multiply this and then I send this into the normal. You see that I'm not getting what I want exactly, and it's not as intense. I don't have control over that. So sometimes it's actually better to use the normal separately and then combine it into the other normal, and you have more control, and then also you have more sharpness. I'm not sure the best word to describe it, but the difference is very clear. They seem like separate cuts into the material as opposed to taking on the same form everywhere. So that kind of variation is always great. So this is the plaster. I'm not going to go through every single texture because I want to cover a lot more of the objects in this video. So this is the base plaster, and then we have the stone. So let that load up. So this, again, not as many nodes as you might think, and using the cell pattern, which is this Voronoi? I think it is. And, you know, using several nodes to help find the edges and the shapes, and then soften it, blur it so it's soft, and then add some random color, etc. Now the cool thing about this one is that I used the plaster from the other designer file and piped it into this so that it matches whenever I layer these over. So as you can see, it's hiding under there, which is great because when we blend it in Unreal, it looks like it's just blending perfectly on top, but it's actually creating another copy of the plaster underneath. But because it's the same material, it looks fine. So I thought that was really cool. This is a technique I learned from one of my tutors at Think Tank. He goes by Johnny Nodes on YouTube. Please go and check out his stuff. It is ridiculous. So let's carry on and move on to the brick. And speaking of him, he would probably I have learned to do a better brick than this, but I was a bit stretched for time, and it's not the focus. Like, how much brick do you see here, right? Like, so in these cases, it's okay to not go crazy, and that's what I did. So I spent a very short amount of time on this one, just showing how I can get like some variation in the roughness. As you can see, some parts are shiny, some parts are beaten a bit more than others, and yeah, I don't think I put the plaster under there, but I used the same color. So with these three textures, I was able to blend between them and have a lot of variation. Now what you're seeing on top of it is dirt, and these are decals. So if I turn it off, if I turn off all the decals in the scene, you'll see it just look a bit more new, right? On, off, especially where the oven is. Crazy, right? So I'll go through them quickly in Designer because they're really simple, and because when you layer, you can get a lot out of just a few decals. So again, this looks like a lot, but this is, which one is this? I think this is the dirt one. So I put them all in one Designer file, and I don't think I ended up using all of these. So, but look how simple this is, right? This is just a grunge matte, and I put like a gradient over it and blended in the color. That's it. I used the gradient to drive the opacity. That's why it's not as the dirt isn't as strong everywhere. And I also used it to drive the normal, so it's coming off of the thing there a little bit. So I did that for like basically all of the others. And for the moss, I actually used some substance files there. Okay, so I had to view each of these in the 3D view and select which one so that it updates. That's the only downside of doing multiple things in one package. No, graph, in one graph. So as you can see, I used the this is available in Substance Painter, but that also means it will work in Designer. So I brought it in, changed some settings, and just like that, I have moss to go into my scene. So that's how I created the decals. I was searching online, and I got tired of seeing like packs of 80,000 and 2,000, and I was stretched for time. So a lot of the times you can get away with creating something simple, and it goes a long way. So if you can look here, these are all decals, right? It's even what I did on the pumpkins, right? So they go a long way. See the dirt. Anyway, I would like to move on so that we can look at some of the other textures that were created. So those are tileables we just went through, but I'd also like to go through some of the hero props. So when I say that, I mean props that were textured 1-to-1. So like this, for example, this is not a tileable texture. I have painted on the drapes, I've done the rust, you know, stuff like that, and then the logs. So let's go through some of these. All right, zoom out here. Okay, so we have Painter open, and I'll start with a texture that I was really proud of. So these are the logs inside of the oven, right? We just saw them, right? These bad boys, we just saw these. Let's turn back on the decals. Ooh, looks much better. So those, this is it. This is all I did to create that. So let's disable those, and we'll step through this very quickly. So this is how it will look when you open in Painter, any object you're going to texture. And I went to look for some wood, right? I just typed in wood and tried out most of these. And at first I was going to use this stylized wood bark. It had the shapes, or so I thought, but I experimented with this one, and I think this gave the rougher bark that I was looking for, that will also match the bark in my scene. So you also have to think about consistency. So with that, I used a mask right here, as you can see, cracked, grunge cracked. So this will come in Painter. So if I search for grunge and go to the alphas, is it that one? No, yeah, this one. There's so many to choose from. So I went through them and I edited them a little, and this will become the part of the log, or the area of the logs that is hot, super hot, but not burning. And this is where reference comes in big time. So let me just pull up. So if I pull up my PureRef here and I go to my reference, I don't have a lot of reference, right? But I have useful critical reference. And what I mean by that is I'm not overwhelmed. I can clearly look and be like, oh, okay, this is what I want. You know, this is the look I'm going for. So if I look there, you can see there is a lot of orange, but there are still places of like yellow showing up to show where the fire is hottest, I guess, and yellow and white. So I went in with another mask, the same mask actually, and just made it a bit less intense. So where you see the balance, in this mask, I basically made it a little bit less. And that makes sense because we can cover the same area where the heat is, but inside of it, right? And because I was looking at the reference, I did want this shape, these block grid bark shapes. So I went to find another texture, and this is actually paint. This texture is the cracked paint. I think you can see it, right? You can see it, but I stretched it so that it looks like it's cracked wood. So don't be afraid to use things for what they may not be saying they should be used for, because this is paint. So after doing that, I brought in some other grunges to take away from it and make it look a bit rougher. And I did the same technique. I kept the orange, duplicated it, made yellow, and made that a little less intense. So I could have made it a lot more crazy, but I decided that was not what I wanted to do. Oops. So that's how I built this texture piece by piece, and it really came out really well. So I guess that was a mini burning logs tutorial there. Okay, so let's look at some more hero props. So I'll open up the cloth, and the good thing about Painter and texturing like this is that the software doesn't care where the things are located. So if I look at these are the curtains at the top, and these are the cloths way off on the side of the deck, and this is the step. So it didn't actually matter that these are in different locations. You can export a custom little scene showing all of them next to each other so that it is easier to paint. So that's what I did. And I'm not gonna step through this like the last one. I think you should understand the general idea of building on a texture. So I'll just disable everything so you can see. So basic cloth underneath, substance texture already in the software. Added on another texture, gold armor. This is meant for armor, but I put it on here and then I masked it. So the cloth tiers, again, were also done with some presets in Substance, but I obviously edited them and no one cares because you can't tell. Go on, added some more tiers, and then the dirt. These are some footsteps. They look really dark here and really bad, but that's the thing about texturing. You need to put it in the environment. So when it's here, it looks quite nice, even without the decals. Of course, it doesn't look as, you know. So the decals really did do quite a lot, but you get the idea. So let's move on here. Because these textures are quite straightforward, you know, add a little dirt and the color. This is a pattern that is found inside of Substance already. So that's this pattern here. So don't be afraid to use presets, but use them wisely. I added footprints because of the storytelling. The tears occur on the edge where they would be thinnest and, you know, get the most impact, I guess. Not impact, but pulling, for lack of a better word. So I tried to think about where things would occur. And speaking of that, let us look at the Cauldron quickly. This, again, it's just about storytelling. This isn't like, I would do a lot more to this if I had time, but the idea is that it's an old cauldron and it hasn't been used in a while. So you can see the dirt and the grime have dried and they've gotten a little darker. As we know, liquids and stuff usually dry in a darkened state. The edge of the cane has the grime. It's not just green, plain green. There's some brown there to show that it's older than the other green, and it doesn't go all the way to the top. It goes where it would probably stir and boil and touch So stuff like that is what I thought about. Of course, the rust, this could be a bit less. And the rest inside. So just, you know, thinking about storytelling and figuring out why things are the way they are and what makes sense goes quite a long way, even if you're not a texturing master. So let's go to the shield since we're talking about storytelling. Now this is a magician's house, don't forget. So a magician's abode, rather. So these shields have not been used in a while. They don't look that crazy. When I say crazy, I mean they don't look that strong, and they've just been put, as you can see, to decorate the deck. And I do like them, but they're old. So how do I show that? I have the paint peeling off, show that it has been painted several times and still peeled off. Shows the age. Of course, when the rain fell, the rust dripped down and the grime dripped down, stuff like that. And I did that for both of them. And even though you don't see the back, I did put some leather and some stuff there. So storytelling. Let's go to the oven rocks. Again, storytelling here, yes, because there's going to be dirt around where the oven is, or soot, but I decided not to put all of that here. I just got the idea of the rocks and left it at that, because I would later use decals. So I've used the stylized stone. If I disable it, you can see all the other dirt I put there. And again, another preset. Now I have created my own presets, so they're not shown here, but I'll show you that in the next one, which is the trim sheet. So what you will see here are presets that I created myself. So let's go to wood. 2 of these have been created by me in Designer, and I'm saying it like that to show that you don't just have to use Substance presets. You can create your own in Designer, and that will probably be worth a separate video. So let me know in the comments if you want to see a tutorial on how to do that, especially for stuff like this, for like wood specifically. Okay, so if I disable my texture and I drag this in, this is a preset that I was talking about, and I have enabled certain things to be changed. So I can change the color of the grain. You see it got darker there, and the intensity of the height. So stuff like that. If I drag in this is a wood end that I created in Designer, and I've included even more controls. So more rings, the intensity of the ring grain, like between the rings, and the number of circular cracks. So this is really cool, and I think it's worth a tutorial, but you let me know. I am open to creating one if there's enough interest in it, because it's really cool. So all that to say, I used the combination of those materials that I created to do this trim sheet, and this would drive a lot of the wood that you see in the scene. That's how this was that's how that was created. And to finish, let's look at the roof tiles. As I said, they don't have to be all placed on the roof. I just took 4 tiles because I have 4 variations, and colored them in Designer. Sorry, in Painter, textured them in Painter, and then exported them as separate texture sets, as you can see here, A, B, C, and D. And if we look at one of them, right, tile A, that's it. It's not a lot. So I baked down Sculpt, you'll see in a moment, but then I also used the Stylized Stone preset in Painter, but then I added to it, right? I edited the settings, then I added the edge highlights, some edge wear, and some slight dust. Now, one running theme you may have seen in this video so far is the use of the curvature channel. So if I look at any of these textures, you can see this white highlight going around places that are raised or lowered. I find this really helps stuff to look a lot more stylized. Having that curvature, even in the pumpkins, you can see I placed a little edge. Having that edge be painted always gives a bit of a stylized look. So it has a little cheat that I learned there. So you can see the decals. Okay, so let's go back. I'll switch to the time lapse now so you can see what I was talking about. So for this, as you can see, as I said, ZBrush, I baked that in Painter, and then I went into Maya and I started selecting the tiles I want to have variation separately. Now, this is not the most efficient way. I was kind of on a brute force high at this point. So I tortured myself in doing it this way, but there are procedural ways to select random tiles and give them random vertex colors. So, but I'm just doing that manually and giving them different materials for Painter. So I do this painfully for each tile in the scene. And you can see here at the end, I've selected all of the tiles. So I take a sample of each of them and bring them into Painter. But before I do that, I make sure to export them and preview them in Unreal. So you can see I'm testing it out in Unreal, and back to Maya, back to Painter, Painter, Unreal. And I'm going back and forth as I test the colors and the different sculpts that I did for those tiles. I'm going back and forth, and you can see I'm testing the project. I did learn how to do color variation within Unreal. So I think you'll see that at the end of this video maybe. But anyway, so brute force always works though. So as you can see, I have imported them and I'm testing them, and they're clearly too strong, but it's good to know this early so that I can go back to the texture and adjust it, make it more subtle, make the variation a little bit more homogeneous, stuff like that. And I do this back and forth for a while. I believe this process took about 30 minutes in total. And with all the tweaking going back and forth, it was actually a lot of fun because I don't know, I am a simple man. There are colors and blue is my favorite color. So it is what it is. But this was actually a fun process, and it was very smart to do it in an iterative fashion. What I mean is going through a loop, iteration loop, where I look at the tile, I make a change, and I see how it looks in the scene. This is the best way to figure out and to finalize things that you're working on in a large scene. So, and I'll just leave us here. So this brings us to the end of the video, and I do want to thank you for watching all the way to the end, or skipping to parts you want, whichever it is. But I hope this gave you a really much stronger idea of how I textured the things in my environment in this scene. There's a few textures I didn't touch on. Of course, the foliage I'll do in a separate video, and stuff like the windmill and stuff like that. You know, I try to focus on the big, more important textures, but I really do hope that this helped and you can use these tips and this guideline to help yourself in your own environments. So thank you for watching. And if it helped, definitely give a brother a like. I'll see you in the next video. Respect. protect.